It's time for the SLMA radio show with your host today, me, Susan Finch. So glad you're here. Welcome, everyone. I'm Susan Finch. I'm your host today for SLMA Radio, and I am very excited to have the second installment of my series with Linda Zimmer. Linda Zimmer is the president of Marcom Interactive, and they specialize in digital marketing. But her passion has been building deeply in the area of privacy. And so she has taken the initiative to become a certified privacy manager. She received that certification through the International Association of Privacy Professionals, which is the largest international association. And Linda and I had our conversation recently about hacking. Myth 1, hacking is the number one way data is breached. And myth 2, that data security is the number one job of IT. We dispelled both of those myths in the previous show, and you'll have to listen to that. Today we're continuing the conversation with myth 3. Privacy is dead, and people don't care because they share. So we're going to dive into that and myth 4 after it. So Linda, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here again.
So let's dive right into that, because there is, I think, a complacency for some of us. I know for me, I will admit, totally admit and own this, I don't care about ads that are served to me that are tailored to me.
Right.
Because I would rather see that than ads that are disgusting and gross that have nothing to do with my interests.
Yes.
So that's one of those trade-offs, that means somebody, though, is learning about me, taking my data, manipulating it, sharing it with others to be able to serve me back things that I might actually want to follow up with.
Right. Right. And you know, it's so interesting to me because when we talk about the privacy and all of the tracking that's going on through social media and just our general use of the web, you know, we really target advertisers. It's like, oh, it's the advertisers that are pushing this stuff at us, and it's true. But we also have to remember that a lot of the platforms that we love, trust, and deal with, you know, multiple times a day, that their actual business revenue source is data, right? It's not advertising. That's how the money comes in, but their business model is all this collection of data. So what's interesting about it is we want to be able to connect with each other and share this stuff. And we want to be able to do that, you know, as humanly as possible, and we don't want to be thinking about, gee, I'm going to post this image of my little baby. Is that going to come back to bite me at some point because someone's going to use this? Well, you know, it's really incumbent on us, though, to understand that that photo is something that's being logged in a system that's going to say something about us. It's going to put us in a category, and it's going to be kept. And as we all know from the Snowden leakages, who knows who could get hold of that? And you know, we're putting more and more data in the hands of these platforms, advertisers, and the government in doing these things. So probably the biggest thing I can say about this as a myth is that when, and I think a very recent one was done, I believe by the Pew Center, on attitudes about customers, consumers, and their privacy, and whether they share and so don't care. And actually what it showed was that something like 79 or 75% of consumers care deeply about it. The problem is they have no way to know how they can control it. You know, I mean, let's think about it. I keep in touch with my kids who don't live near me through Facebook.
Right.
And because that's what they use. And
yep.
So I have to use it as a mom in order to know what's going on with my kids and my daughters-in-law, right? So it's like this very compelling thing that you have to do. But at the same time, even as knowledgeable as I am about privacy, the fact of the matter is I have zero control.
Well, you can't. That's the whole thing. Is it's such a it's such a pretty princess dress up in costume kind of thing when they say, "Oh, and do you accept our rules?" If you say no, you're out.
You're out.
You are locked out. You don't get to play. You're gone. And people go in, and I know for Facebook alone, I coach people to lock it down as tightly as they can, but you're still putting it out there, and it's still being stored there, and it's still being
that's
used.
the issue, is even if people can't see it, Facebook can, and Facebook is storing that information and building a profile of you. And I think for us sales and marketing people, what we have to keep in mind is that we treat data as if it's truth, and data is not truth. Right?
Ooh, say that again.
Data is not truth. I mean, think about it. Is, you know, these profiles are gathered about individuals. And I think it was Sherlock Holmes that said something like, you can predict what the average man will do, but with absolute certainty. But you can never predict what the individual man will do. And basically saying, yeah, as a group, we are pretty predictable. But if you just look at someone like you or me who are online searching for random things, why? Because our client base is all over the place, right? It could be healthcare, it could be nonprofit, it could be financial. You know, so the data that's being collected about you isn't really the truth, and yet it's being sold as the truth. And also something we have to keep in mind as marketing and salespeople is that people evolve over time. They change, and their context changes. And so if we're relying too heavily on this data to inform how we interact with our customers, we're, number one, missing opportunities, but number two, we could be turning them off altogether because we're making... Yeah. They've evolved, you know. I mean, it's like, okay, it's a new year. What am I going to do really differently this year to evolve myself? And so where you may have a profile because of my last year's use on Facebook, and now I decide I'm not going to use it anymore, I'm going over to Instagram, and I'm doing a whole new thing over there. You know, my point here is that we can use data to get insight, but not to translate it as truth. So yeah, people share, but they also share stuff that has nothing to do with their real life a lot of times too.
That's true too.
But why we should care about all of this is because as companies, we actually we fall under the purview of a lot of laws about privacy and security that we may not be aware of. So people share, but we also have to be really respectful of that from a brand and reputation management standpoint. Let me give you an example. I got a call from a nonprofit at home. And it was a nonprofit, obviously, looking for a donation. And based on our last conversation, I'm now even more careful about that. But I was really ticked off because I had no relationship with this organization. I did with a related organization on the same issue, happened to be homelessness, and I was very offended that apparently my nonprofit sold my information or shared my information in some way, shape, or form, that other charitable organizations were calling on me, and I stopped donating to that organization.
Right.
Because it became obvious, because I don't talk about what this organization anywhere. No one knows that I had a relationship with this organization, and now other organizations involved in that same charity, and the only place it could have come from was this organization somehow sharing my data, and they just, both of them, all of them, lost out in terms of the donation. So it can really, what we do with this can really destroy our relationships. So consumers do care. It's just that they don't feel like they have any control whatsoever on what happens with the data that they share. And so at some point they just go, okay, I'm going to rely on relationships with organizations that respect the use of my data. And so what we as professionals need to think about is this whole customer journey is not just about the way that we relate to them as we're doing transactions. It's how well we protect what they trust us with.
Right.
And that a lot of times is their personal information.
Their personal information, which is deeper than their name, address, phone number, email.
Exactly.
It is their habits. It is their reviews, their passion, all of those things that build a persona.
Yeah, and here's CES is this week. The Consumer Electronics Show is this week. The head of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, was there giving a talk to all of these executives about the fact that this Internet of Things, all of our physical devices being connected to the Internet and moving data from our personal space up into the cloud somewhere, is probably the central issue at CES for all these products, and really of our time right now, is because more of our devices are smart devices. And so the FTC, again, you may think your customer doesn't care, but you better care, because the FTC is making this a high priority on enforcement of these unfair, deceptive, and consumer privacy protections. So trust me, you are in their crosshairs, so you better care about all the regulations.
That is a great break point for us, because I want to come back to talk about myth number 4, because that kind of dovetails into it, the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, here's station identification break. SLMA Live is an internet radio broadcasting station dedicated to broadcasting programs in the business-to-business arena. Have you considered hosting your own internet radio program? It's easier than a webinar, has greater reach and listenership than a webinar. Internet radio is a content generation machine to reach at-work listeners. For information about hosting your own program on slmalive.com, contact our producer, Jim Obermeyer, at 360-933-1259, or visit our website, slmalive.com. Have you seen the new SLMA website? It can be found at theslma.com. That's theslma.com. Membership is still free like it always has been. All members are able to add member-to-member discounts. Enhanced membership has been added. For $50 a year, you can unlock all the benefits of being an SLMA member, including adding your events, webinars, podcasts, whatever you want to our calendar. You can also get listed in multiple categories in our member-only directory. Check out theslma.com. I'm Susan Finch. I'm your host today on SLMA Radio at theslma.com and slmaradio.com from the Sales Lead Management Association. I'm here today with my guest, Linda Zimmer, the president of Marcom Interactive, which specializes in digital marketing. But today we are talking about her big passion and what should be all of our big passion for our company, and that is privacy management, data security, and where it really does get breached, and some of the myths. And right now we're coming back with myth number 4. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. You will have to listen to the previous one to be all caught up, because we have covered some pretty big deal. So right now, Linda, let's go on to myth 4. If it's in the cloud, have a login so it's safe.
Not. It is not. Well, now let me step back and say a lot of cloud providers, especially in the last year, are getting smarter and wiser about data breaches and security. But we've even had some kind of, well-known, like Salesforce, have some data breaches. So it's not true that what's in the cloud, especially if your cloud provider does not encrypt your data when it's what I call at rest, meaning it's sitting in the cloud, it's stored in the cloud, but it's in plain text, plain view. It's not encrypted.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of the biggies, though, because these are the ones that are near and dear to everybody right now, and we rely on it for businesses and collaborating with third-party companies and contractors and all those types of things. Let's tackle Dropbox, Box, and Google Drive.
Right. Well, interestingly, in the last year to 18 months, really since the Edward Snowden debacle, are now encrypting their data at rest.
Who is?
All of them. Oh. All of the ones that you just mentioned are now encrypting. Yes. Yes. And many cloud providers are encrypting, but these are, down, as you call them, they're the down and dirty, everyday tools that we're using. But my point is, it's the question you need to ask. So a salesperson is going to call you and tell you all about the great features, which is good. Those need to match up, but you also need to know whether that data is encrypted at rest. Now, it might be encrypted in transit, meaning, oh yeah, between your computer and our server, it's encrypted. That's not the same as also being encrypted while it's sitting there in the cloud just resting, sleeping until you need it. So it's very, very important that you ask that question of your vendors, is that data encrypted? Now,
at rest.
At rest.
Just not because yes. Encrypted leaves it open and they can answer yes, but like you just pointed out, is it encrypted at rest versus only encrypted in transit?
Exactly. And you need to know, and I feel really strongly about this as a business person, is we kind of are going head to head with the government on this, is they do not want us to encrypt. Okay, if we have to encrypt from your computer to your server, okay, but we want to be able to subpoena those records and be able to get into those records, and if they're encrypted and no one has the key, we can't do it, or we have to, go through some big decryption process. And I encourage business people to really keep just a brief eye on what's going on in Congress on this, because if the laws come down that we cannot encrypt our data because the government feels that they need access to it, and this is not a radical, radicalization of what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is it puts our customers at risk, and it puts our businesses at risk for breaches. So what we've got to do is work with government to get some sensible, practical, and balanced approaches to this. And so we have to, as business people, be engaged in this conversation.
It's so funny. As soon as you said that, though, about the government, how they prefer it to be a certain way, my first thought was to just kind of straighten up. It's like, too bad. Well, too bad then. You want to subpoena me? Go to the work to decrypt it, because I'm protecting it for the 99% of the time.
But, we have this with cell phone manufacturers right now. I mean, Apple came out with their brand new iOS, and basically it says it's encrypted, done. You guys are safe, and the government is, the FBI in particular, I believe it is petitioning Congress to make this illegal. And we need to know this, because as business people, if we're using that device to move information, we're all on the move, so is our data. If we're using that device and it's out in the open, we need to know that so that we can take mitigating circumstances or steps. But to me, it's putting our customers' data at risk if we're going to do business in modern ways and be competitive and be innovative. And so we've got to come to some agreements about encryption schemes and keeping data safe from hackers, because if the government can hack it, so can the Chinese or our competitor or our employee, and do things with that data that is the lifeblood of our business. So we got to kind of keep an eye on it. But
right,
one of the other issues too is that I wanted to bring up about this is to make sure that your third-party cloud vendors disclose to you what their security measures are. I know when I worked with Johnson & Johnson, and I worked with Intel, and we had a 8 or 10 page security audit thing we had to answer. And this was something that we were not even keeping on our own servers. We were using a cloud-based system. But they were so concerned about their data that we had to answer all these questions about our security. It would not be a bad idea for all of us to get into that little, even asking a few questions like, is the data encrypted, in transit, and at rest? No.
Well, this brings us to your gift that
Yes.
you have made for all of us. You guys, if you're listening to the show, you're going to see a link within the post, and even on the YouTube channel, because this is so important, Linda is giving you all some checklists, and you will be able to download them. They are PDFs, and they do not have anything nasty in them.
No, they're safe.
They're safe PDFs. You can scan them if you want, but they are going to be stored, and there'll be a link there. You can right-click, you can open it, view it online, whatever you want. But these are for you as a starting point to start to know the questions you need to know the answers to keep you secure, your customers secure, to keep their trust, and to not have yourself totally wide open to these vulnerable avenues. No, we don't have any tabletop exercises for you. You would have to hire Linda for that, because this is what she knows how to do. She brings that human side into it. If you saw it on our previous show, we talked about social engineering, and where most of the breaches actually come from, it's in more simple places than you'd think. It's from picking up the phone and having a conversation. So, Linda, how can everybody find you?
You can find me at marcominteractive.com, or you can find me on Google+. Just Google my name, and I'm sure it will come up just fine, because the Google URL is not a very friendly one to give verbally. So those are probably the two best places to find me. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and feel free to connect with me there. And hopefully we'll be having additional conversations, and if you need a private conversation, I will allow Susan to give out my email address.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'm going to first have them connect with you on all your typical venues.
Perfect.
And then you can start those conversations, because I do value your privacy too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Linda, it has been a pleasure, and what an exciting conversation. Folks, who would have thought that data and security could be so exciting to talk about? But you all have some actionable items, you have some new awareness that you didn't have before, and you have some conversations you need to get started at your companies. So you will be able to watch the replay of this on slmaradio.com. You will also be able to find this and more shows on our main website, which is theslma.com. That is THESLMA.com. I'm Susan Finch. I am your co-host, sitting in for James Obermeyer, because I like doing it on video. So here we are. And thank you, Linda. I will look forward to talking to you very soon for part 3 of this conversation.
Sounds great. Thank you, Susan.